What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, reviewing today Wolfenstein II on Nintendo Switch. This project, when it first came out late last year, was one of my favorite things of 2017. You just don't see fantastic single-player focused shooters anymore, but this one is absolutely top-notch. Not only does it have good controls and an interesting setting, but the writing itself is surprisingly on point for being just a straightforward shooter. So, for this video, I want to focus a little bit on what makes this different, because when you're bringing any game to the Nintendo Switch, you're going to have to make a couple sacrifices. The hardware isn't nearly as strong, so they usually have to do something in order to make it where it can work. And I have to say that overall, this is a port that works way more awesome than you probably are looking forward to. Let's face facts, they are going to have to do a little bit when it comes to the general resolution, but these sacrifices are so small that I didn't really notice it for the most part. Let's begin this video specifically talking about the graphics, because this is probably the biggest change overall that comes to the Nintendo Switch. So the people who have worked on this port are very talented. They've done the recent Doom port and other projects. They are very good, probably the best in the business. But one of their biggest tricks is something called dynamic resolution, which is just a fancy technical term which means that the more that's going on, things will fluctuate from 720p all the way down to 480. Overall, this works exceptionally well, making it where big firefights and all sorts of crazy action all stays incredibly good without sacrificing frame rate or freezing up the screen while it's trying to load this combat. I will say, the only really big drawback to this entire game, because it's still so fantastic, is that if there are more than 7 people on screen at once, it starts to heavily dip in resolution, to the point at which things are downright blurry, and that is the only drawback of this. Just as an example, let's do an extended clip of this giant shootout. So here I am, and I'm in a giant Nazi courtroom killing these scummy people, and as you can see, it keeps having to really severely dip. I mean, it looks like the performance is just absolutely tanking. Thankfully, the controls and general movement is not at all being sacrificed. It's simply a visual downgrade, but there is so much going on that it gets really hard to see a little bit, especially on my giant TV. These moments, it becomes so murky, it can be a little bit hard to tell who is a desk, who's a chair, and who's a Nazi with a machine gun aimed at my head. Thankfully, this does not happen super often, because for the most part, this game is all about more tighter quarters combat, and when you're just walking around tiny hallways and sneaking up behind a general, those times everything is working flawlessly. It's only when there's really big, crazy moments, or you're getting something like a laser gun that can delete barriers, that's when the game starts to have some real major troubles. These times where it goes down to standard resolution aren't as noticeable when it comes to handheld mode, because, well, obviously the screen is a lot smaller, so when it goes like this, it just makes it where things are a little bit harder to discern. It can't really decipher different objects as easily, but even in the most heavily intense moments that are hard on the processor, things still seem to be running quite well. Just to highlight this, here's one of my favorite moments that's obviously very hard on the programming, which is a giant firefight on a train. I'm not going to explain any of this, that way there's no spoilers, but this is just an out of context clip of it. As you can see, I'm running around and there doesn't really seem to be any major performance drop. For the most part, I'm kind of just cruising around and everything is still staying incredibly smooth even when the resolution begins to climb or go downhill. Now, this is so cool because I feel like that was my biggest concern by far, because when this game originally came out, I absolutely loved it. It was so cool, but something that really really helped it was the unique art. When you were playing through it, it was very obvious that this is such a gritty, realistic world. So I had some concerns going into this that they would have to take a big step downward and you'd lose a lot of that cool charm to this really chaotic new America. Something I do have to say is, it seems like the things that they've done the most is, this seems like they made particular character models and certain environments have lower resolution, but not the game as a whole. I just noticed that sometimes I'd see one person who looked like they were on an Xbox 360 and had really weird looking facial features, and other people looked fantastic. Some cutscenes would run really fluidly, and some would be not so much. That's not really a bad thing, it's just, I think that they had to really try and pick their battles, choosing which parts are going to be 720p and other areas where they're going to have to take a little bit of that sharpness out. The other thing that they've added to this game that's really different, and I don't know if it worked as well as they probably intended, is motion controls. This makes it where you can go into the menu and turn it on, and it makes it where as you tilt your controller, you can actually do more minute aiming just by doing a couple little wiggles of your Joy-Cons. I didn't particularly care for this. It works decently, but it doesn't seem to have that tightness that I really expect. I really love the movement controls and stuff like Splatoon 2 because it is so one-to-one. When I'm tilting my controller, every single motion is exact, whereas this is a little bit more floaty. Since this is an added feature, it's pretty easy not to get mad at it, because, I mean, it's just something extra in case you want to goof off. I did find it a little bit weirder when I was trying to use it in handheld mode and motion controls, because that's just way too much, but, you know, that's fine because the normal controls, even with your standard controller, still work fantastic. I do want to say, it seems like they've dramatically upped the auto aim in this. The original game, when I played through it, was pretty difficult at times. I mean, I probably died 12 times during my full campaign playthrough, and, well, each of those deaths was very, very bloody. It was when I was cornered, had no supplies, and was completely outgunned. Whereas here, I actually completed the entire game on standard difficulty and only died twice. It seems like they've just tried to make it a little bit more approachable to people who aren't as accustomed to first-person shooters. I don't think a lot of Nintendo fans are super into ultra-hardcore games like this that are just about super running and gunning and really over-the-top action, so they've put this in to make it where it's a little bit simpler. But that being said, you can turn the difficulty up and you can disable auto-aim, which once I discovered how strong it was, I ended up turning it off myself and loving it even more. That's kind of what I love the most about this port, is that it just provides so many good options. It's, well, overall very well done, but I like that there's just so many different layers of choice. What guns do you want to upgrade? How do you want to handle a particular shootout? Do you want motion controls? Do you want to put it on the hardest difficulty and get your brains blown out? That is what is so cool and epic about this. But I just think that for the most part, this is aimed at people who have never played it before. I'm somebody who played the original version back on PlayStation 4 and really enjoyed it, but coming back and going through it again, it's still top notch. My biggest hope is that Nintendo people really pick this up. It is a fantastic port and a great version of an already great game. So really, this is just showing the fact that Bethesda is continuing to support the Switch in such monumental ways. This is not a rushed version that's just out here to try and grab a couple extra bucks. It clearly has some actual attention and detail in it. They wanted this to be fantastic, and they absolutely pulled it off. I have to tip my hat because it is so good. If you are looking for a really tight, really fun, and really gory shooter, this is definitely for you. Okay, so we've heard a lot of good and a little bit of bad, but let's go over to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Wolfenstein II, the new Colossus on Nintendo Switch, a 9 out of 10. The studio that converted this over to the Switch is somebody called Panic Button, and these guys just continue to impress me. I just want to say, if any of you happen to see this, keep up the amazing work. The Nintendo Switch is already a fun console, but bringing over these top-notch experiences in such a purified format is so cool, and I'm glad you guys are taking the time to do it right. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Oh, hey, I was just playing a little bit of Grand Theft Auto on my Darth Vader PSP. Are you curious what I'm going to come out with next? Well, if you click this button, you'll be subscribed to be the first to know. Also, if you click over here and here, you can see my latest review and my latest top 10. I promise, it was super good. Or it was really bad and I'm sure you can just make fun of me in the comments. Either way, it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching.